Hi everyone, this is Sam Ghosh and today I am going to talk about the e-commerce industry in India. I have divided this presentation in 5 parts. First I will talk about why should we talk about this industry anyways, then the demand side, then supply side, then some policy issues, and then some trends in this industry. So let's get started. So why should we talk about this industry anyways? What is the importance of this industry? The Indian e-commerce market is expected to be $150 billion by 2022 and $200 billion by 2026 from merely $38.5 billion in 2017. So it is growing really fast. It is growing at 31% growth rate annually, and it will slow down to 7.5% growth rate. Now, this industry is expected to be the second largest e-commerce market by 2034. It is dependent on the consumer market, and Indian consumer market is a $6 trillion opportunity by 2030 as per a report from the World Economic Forum. The overall retail market in India was $672 billion in 2017 and expected to be $1,200 billion by 2021. Now, if you look at the figures, the e-commerce market in India in 2017 was merely 5.73% of the overall retail industry, and merely 2.11% of the whole consumer spending. So you can see that although this industry is growing really fast, there is a lot of opportunity. There is a room for opportunity going forward. Now, let's look at the potential. Currently, India has 687 million internet subscribers as of September 2019. The rural internet penetration is merely 27%, which is really low, and compared to urban, more than 100% in urban areas, there is an opportunity that the rural internet growth will actually will lead the growth in this e-commerce sector going forward. Now let's talk about the demand side, that is the market for e-commerce in India. So this chart we have seen before. So this market is expected to be $150 billion by 2022 and $200 billion by 2026, and it is growing around 31% annually, and it will slow down to 7.5% annually. Now, this is the overall market. Now let's look at the retail market. The overall retail market in India is growing at around 11% annually, and it was $672 billion in 2017. It is expected to be around $1,750 billion by 2026. And the e-commerce market as a percentage of the retail sales is expected to reach around 11.5%, 11.56 or 11.6% by 2022, and it's seen that after that it will be around in that level. So what it says about that, merely 11-12% of the whole retail sales in e-commerce, given that the e-commerce market can actually grow really fast, and if that share can be increased, that potential is much higher. Now let's look at the penetration of e-commerce in different categories. The consumer electronics is fairly good amount of penetration, good amount of e-commerce penetration there, around 17%. But other sectors, especially beauty and personal care, consumer appliances, consumer health, food and grocery, all these sectors did not see a lot of e-commerce and digital penetration. And these are all 2017 figures, so the situation may be a little bit different now. The total e-commerce, total internet users in India as per TRAI was 687 million as of September 2019. Now, this is a very important chart here. So what it says that in people who have internet access, only 50% of them use WhatsApp, Facebook and social media. 40% of them use Google, Wikipedia and email. A little bit higher than 30% use banking and basic paid services, and only 10% you they of the internet users are monthly active consumer internet product buyers. So a little change, little improvement from this 50% to 10% can have drastic impact on the sector, and this we'll come back to this later. Now, mainly the e-commerce growth going forward will depend on smartphones. India had around more than 500 million smartphone users by the end of 2019, and 91% of if you compare the internet access in broadband and narrowband, 91% uses broadband, and in those 91%, 97% of them access broadband using mobile wireless. So the growth going forward depends on smartphones. Now let's look at the profile of the internet users in India. This is NCCS, or New Consumer Classification System. This is a tool used to classify consumers in India. You can see a lot of difference between the urban and rural internet users. Mostly, so what it says that NCCS-A are the people who have the highest purchasing power, and going forward NCCS-E are the people who have lowest purchasing power. So in the urban areas we see a lot of NCCS-A, a lot of NCCS-B, and then NCCS-C a little lower, and then likewise. And in the rural areas we see that mostly these people are 29% of these are NCCS-C, and then 19% NCCS-D, and very small as and 27% NCCS-B. So there is fundamentally a small amount of 19% of them are NCCS-A compared to the 43% in urban areas. So there is a difference between the purchasing power of the urban internet users and rural internet users. That is the point here. Now let's talk about the supply side of this industry. See the different steps in the e-commerce process. First mile logistics, fulfillment, processing and sorting, line haul, and last mile delivery. Depending on the division of these steps between the seller and the e-retailer, we have fundamentally two models: marketplace model and inventory led model. The marketplace model is fundamentally pure e-commerce. The e-commerce player fundamentally works as a connector between the buyers and sellers and do not deal with inventory much. So inventory is not stored by the retailer, and packaging quality checks are not carried out by the retailer but done by the sellers. In an inventory led model, the inventory is purchased by the retailer. Also, retailer carries out the end-to-end process, better quality control and service levels. Now the problem with marketplace model is the quality. As we can see that because the sellers are responsible for the quality, they may not be specialists in the quality checks and quality maintenance of the quality. But in an inventory led model, as there can be standardized models and economies of scale, better quality control and service levels can be maintained. But the marketplace model, as there is no requirement for inventory management and also this quality control, all these issues, it is much more lighter. It is easier to scale. It takes less. Less capital. Inventory-led model, on the other hand, takes a lot of capital because and overheads, because you have to store and manage inventory and also carry out the quality controls and all these things. Now, another option is that is the most popular now is the fulfillment by the e-retailer. So the inventory is purchased by the seller, stored in the fulfillment centers of the e-retailers, but owned by the seller. Fundamentally, the e-retailer provides services of quality checks, packaging, and labeling to the sellers, and charges some kind of fee for that. And this fulfillment model is scalable and provides a better quality and takes less capital to scale. Now, based on the offerings that the e-commerce platform provides, it can be divided into horizontal e-commerce and vertical e-commerce. A horizontal e-commerce is fundamentally going to a mall. It's a one-stop shop. It covers various categories. They are fundamentally generalists. They provide some offerings of a wide range of categories, of all categories. A vertical e-commerce is fundamentally about being a specialist, and they cover only one category or very few categories, related categories based on a single theme, like home decor or childcare, something like that. Now, as horizontal e-commerce are not specialists, they are not guided towards a single consumer class, but the vertical e-commerce are. So there is a lack of focus in the horizontal e-commerce. That's why they have difficulty to create the best possible shopping experience. But vertical e-commerce sites can. So you can see that there are specific products like which involves a lot of time, and like buying a glass, but like eyeglasses and buying clothing. For these products, vertical e-commerce sites are better for high involvement products, because then this platform can create special tools like animated tools or like AI based tools for a specific product category, which horizontal e-commerce sites cannot do. Now let's look at the division of different categories by sale. This is a 2018 figure, and 48% are electronics by value, and then apparels, and then very small percentage home and furnishing, baby, beauty and personal, and then books and others. Now let's look at the different players in India. So the biggest e-commerce player is Flipkart, and a little behind is Amazon, more than 30% market share. And then we have Myntra, Paytm Mall, Snapdeal, all 4%, 4.45% to 2%. And then we have many players in this 25.2 in others category. Now let's look at the different policies involving this e-commerce, this industry. The National E-commerce Policy, which is draft policy right now, and Personal Data Protection Bill. So let's get started with draft National E-commerce Policy. This draft covers data and privacy, infrastructure, e-commerce marketplaces, regulatory issues, stimulating domestic digital economy, and export promotion through e-commerce. Now, while talking about data and privacy, e-commerce platforms create a lot of data, this data is of immense strategic value. Now, data can be used to understand consumer behavior or detect market trends. Now, it also raises many privacy concerns. This draft talks about how a legal framework is required, a legal and technological framework is required to imposing restrictions on cross-border data flow. Now, this policy talks about how data is like a natural resource, and it is a common goods for the citizens of the country. So, it has to be protected. The data created inside the country has to be protected. It has to be shared as a community good, as a common good with all the startups and small firms that need access to create innovative products and services. So not only it has a legal and technological framework is required to impose restrictions on cross-border data flow, but a suitable framework is required for sharing of data that serve larger public interest. Now, coming to the infrastructure, for this data storage, there has to be a lot of data storage capacity. India doesn't have a lot of data storage capacity right now. That's why in the last budget speech, the finance minister talked about a policy to enable the private sector players to build data center parks throughout the country. She also talked about a domestic policy, our policy for domestic alternatives to foreign-based clouds and email facilities. Now, while talking about the e-commerce marketplaces, this policy talks about the FDI. So 100% FDI is allowed in the marketplace model under the automatic route, but no FDI is allowed in the inventory-led model. This policy touches upon the anti-counterfeiting measures, anti-piracy measures, and also authenticity of ratings and reviews, customer service, and prevention of sale of prohibited items. Now, overall, talking about the overall regulatory framework, this policy talks about while crafting the regulations, the policymakers need to understand that e-commerce is interdisciplinary, and there is a lot of dynamism in this sector. So these business models are changing always, and they have to keep that in mind. Also, every firms and startups also need some hand-holding with the data, and infant ancestry status. And this also talks about how significant economic presence as a concept can help taxing the large technology firms. Also, a framework for consumer protection, and also some payment related issues, use of data for policy making, etc. This policy draft also talks about use of smart devices and IoT devices, automation of logistics sector. Also, how this logistics sector can be improved with customs clearance, online customs clearance, use of EDI, etc. Export has been a major pain point for Indian economy. India has a negative net exports, and e-commerce can be leveraged for the growth of exports, and for that different steps has to be taken. So this policy talks about how the logistics, global logistics, international logistics for e-commerce has to be simplified to give a boost to the e-commerce sector, and especially the e-commerce sector which e-commerce players who deal with the global distribution. So this can be the supply chain created by these e-commerce players can be used for boosting Indian exports and help Indian manufacturers and producers to reach the global markets. Now let's talk about the Personal Data Protection Bill. Will provide for protection of the privacy of individuals relating to their personal data, specify the flow and usage of personal data, create a relationship of trust between the persons and entities processing the personal data, protect the rights of individuals whose personal data are processed, to create a framework of organizational and technical measures in processing of data, laying down norms for social media intermediary, cross-border transfer, accountability of entities processing personal data, remedies for unauthorized and harmful processing, and to establish a Data Protection Authority of India. Now, the processing of personal data, where such data has been collected, disclosed, and shared or otherwise processed within the territory of India, comes under this bill. The organizations or any organizations or like a state or any Indian company, any citizen of India, or any person or body of persons incorporated or created under Indian law will come under this bill, under the jurisdiction of this bill. The processing or personal data by data fiduciaries or data processors not present within the territory of India, if such processing is in connection with any business carried on in India or any systematic activity of offering goods or services to data principals within the territory of India, or in connection with any activity which involves providing or profiling of data principals within the territory of India, will come under the jurisdiction. It will not apply to the processing of anonymized data. Now, data fiduciaries are any person, including the state, a company, any juristic entity, or any individual who alone or in conjunction with others determines the purpose and means of the processing of personal data. They have certain obligations. Now, the personal data can be processed only for specific, clear, and lawful purpose, and there has to be transparency and accountability doing the processing. This data protection bill provides certain rights to the individuals. The bill sets out certain rights to the individuals. These include the right to obtain confirmation whether the personal data has been processed, seek correction of inaccurate, incomplete, or out-of-date personal data, have personal data transferred to any other data fiduciary, and restrict continuing disclosure of their personal data by a fiduciary. Now, there are some grounds for processing of personal data. The bill allows the processing of data by fiduciaries only if consent is provided. However, in certain cases, like when the state is providing benefits to the individual or legal proceedings or medical emergency, this rule can be avoided. This bill also defines social media intermediaries. These intermediaries are the organizations or tools which enable online interaction between users and allows for sharing of information. All such intermediaries which have users above a notified threshold or whose actions can impact electoral democracy or public order have certain obligations. This bill also sets out the rules for a data protection authority. Now, sensitive data can be transferred outside India only with explicit consent. However, such data should continue to be stored in India, and certain personal data cannot be transferred outside of India. Now let's talk about the different trends in the e-commerce sector in India. Amazon, after the last festive sales, reports 91% of new customers coming from Tier 2 and 3 towns. Fortune India writes there is a growing demand for international brands such as H&M, Under Armour, and Mango from Tier 2 and 3 markets. E-tailers report 50% growth in sales from non-metros. Now, the buyers from non-metro are very different from the English-speaking metro buyers. Generally, the metro buyers have very common global outlook and they are comparable with the international markets, but the non-metro buyers are that their needs are very local. They prefer vernacular languages, that is Indian languages, and generally access internet using smartphones. So to understand the growth of e-commerce going forward in India, we have to understand mobile commerce, vernacular, assisted commerce, and social commerce. Now, India had more than 500 million smartphones users by the end of 2019. 97% broadband connections are mobile wireless. Going forward, the towns and cities beyond metros, the growth of e-commerce in towns and cities beyond metros will depend on mobile commerce. Then coming to vernacular, Indian languages users on the internet are expected to reach 540 million by 2021. Keeping in mind, Flipkart acquired an artificial intelligence company, Leave.ai, which converts speech to text in 10 Indian languages. Hindi queries are increasing related to laptops, PCs, mobile phones, etc. Now, as mentioned before, the tier 2, tier 3 city, the purchases from tier 2, tier 3 are generally non-English speakers and generally prefer Indian languages. Now, the other aspect is assisted e-commerce. What is assisted e-commerce? So in this case, the consumers do not place online orders on their own. Instead, the order is placed on the merchant shops and the product is either delivered to the shop or customer address. It can help dealing with low internet penetration, less technologically exposed buyers, and also high involvement products and services. Now coming to social commerce. Now let's look at this chart again. We have seen this chart before. There is a huge gap between the users of WhatsApp, Facebook, and social media and the people who use mobile active consumer internet product buyers, that is, people who actually buy something online. This is a 40% gap. This is a huge number, and if somehow it can be mitigated, this gap can be reduced. There is a lot of new consumer sector is actually can be tapped, and one issue is the trust issue. It is the WhatsApp, Facebook, and social media is much less. Trust involvement is much less than buying something online and paying money for paying something online. The another aspect is that is the customer acquisition. So because the daily active users of WhatsApp, Facebook, and social media is much higher, if somehow this can be tapped, then the customer acquisition cost can be lowered for e-commerce. We know that the customer acquisition cost is one of the major costs in e-commerce for e-commerce companies. Now, some players in this sector are Miso. So what Miso does, it enables small business owners run digital shops on social platforms. Similarly, Shop A1, Bulbul. So what they really do is they enable the sellers capture or tap their existing social networks. So existing network of people who they already know. So it solves one problem, that is the trust issue, because people are buying from people who they already know, their family or friends. The second part is because the sellers themselves promote the products, the customer acquisition cost is much lower. And with this, these are the trends in the e-commerce industry. And with this is Sam host. Thank you very much for watching. Bye. Ta-da.